Hello and welcome to Undivided. I'm Brandi Kruse. Thank you for being here. Thank you for, say it with me, your continuing commitment to give common sense a comeback. Happy Friday to all of you, especially to Undivided subscribers. If you want to join our Undivided community, you can do so in two ways. Patreon.com/undivided, or you can become a contributor on my locals community at brandycruz.locals.com. Okay, here's what we're going to get to today. I think it was Ben Shapiro, who he had a quote, "Facts don't care about your feelings." And I always kind of go back to that and try to remind myself about that. We're going to have a wonderful example of what can happen when you put feelings before facts, and sort of a cautionary tale based on something that happened on social media this week, and a really sad story that went viral but was completely made up. Also, yes, we have to talk about Twitter again. I promise I'll give you a break on Twitter stories soon, but I really do think that it's really important for our political conversation in this country, the fate of Twitter and sort of what's happening on Twitter. Well, Elon Musk's Twitter went on a bender last night, banning some pretty prominent journalists for sharing information on the location of his private jet. Which was sort of a new rule. There was a new rule against that on Twitter. Brad Palumbo is a journalist who's been covering the Elon Musk Twitter happenings for Based Politics. And he's going to join us to talk about this latest ordeal and why it does matter to people even who aren't on Twitter.
Probably the Twitter issue and the ongoings do get overhyped relative to their actual importance because, like you said, most Americans don't use Twitter. I think only 1 in 5 do. But I will say this, Twitter is a space where decision makers of pretty significant power, everybody from former presidents, the current president's staff, to major media figures, where they get their news and where they're heavily influenced. So I think we should all care to some extent about what's going on Twitter because it's influencing so many people who are then making the decisions that influence all of our lives.
Also, coming up on Florida Report, the state of Florida is doing something that apparently other states just simply can't muster, and that is actually taking steps to save their taxpayers' money. So Miranda's going to join us to discuss that. Plus, on Understanding America, a quick revisit on the First Amendment, as we have all these conversations around free speech, what it applies to, who it applies to, when it applies. We're going to remind everyone of what the First Amendment actually says, what protections the First Amendment actually provides in the context of what's happening on Twitter. But as I said, starting with facts not caring about your feelings. Like I said earlier, it's a quote, I think it originated from Ben Shapiro, and it's just so appropriate for the times that we're living in where, for instance, when we talk about transgender issues, this conversation that men can give birth, and it's like, well, no, but transgender men can give birth if they were born a woman, but it's like people get so caught up in their emotions and their feelings that they don't want to have factual conversations about things. And you just can't get anywhere that way. And look, I have been guilty of this as well, of responding to something too quickly based on feelings and not doing my due diligence and sitting and waiting and waiting for the facts. The Nick Sandmann case was one of them. I've admitted guilt on this on multiple occasions. The first time I saw the video of Nick Sandmann in the face of that Native American elder on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, I was like, what a little prick. And then, of course, the full video came out and he was like, oh, he's not a little prick. My bad. And so, this is something that's always a learning experience. But there was this really fascinating example of not putting feelings before facts that happened on social media this week. So there was this doctor, Dr. Robert Honeyman, who sent out a tweet to his followers, and it was really sad, and it got a lot of attention. His tweet read, "Sad to announce that my husband has entered a coma after being in the hospital with COVID. The doctor is unsure if he will come out. This year has been the toughest of my life, losing my sister to this virus. This is the first time in my life I don't see light at the end of the tunnel." And that's awful. Like, he says his sister died of COVID this year, and now his husband's in a coma because of COVID. So a lot of people jumped to offer their condolences. It got hundreds of retweets, thousands of likes. Actresses and actors, Sophia Bush was one of them, who jumped in the comments. a bunch of doctors, like notable, well-known, prominent doctors, influencers, a USA Today columnist, a senior writer for NBC News, and the list goes on and on and on. I mean, thousands of people responding to this comment. But then there are the independent thinkers who stop and remember that you cannot put feelings before facts. And one of them was Katie Herzog, who I've had on the show before. She's a co-host of Blocked and Reported, an excellent podcast if you want to listen to it. And she screenshotted that tweet and immediately said red flag, because she immediately thought something's not right here. And the thing that kind of tipped her off to that is his very next tweet. After he said, hey, my husband's in a coma, my sister died of COVID, I don't see light at the end of the tunnel. His very next tweet was, if you could follow me on this platform, I need as much people around me as possible right now, feeling empty sadness. So Katie, again, independent thinker, saw that and thought, your husband's in a coma, you're on Twitter talking about it and asking people to follow you on Twitter. That seems a little odd. And then some other diligent Twitterers started kind of doing some research here. And they did a reverse image search on this Dr. Robert Honeyman, and they found out that his profile picture was actually a stock image. And in fact, well, all this is being like figured out in real time. The stock image model was in the comments like, yeah, that's me. That's me from when I was a stock image model. And then Katie started looking at some of the other doctor accounts that frequently retweet this Dr. Robert Honeyman and each other. And she found out that they don't really exist off Twitter. There's no LinkedIn pages for them. There's no professional bios for them on medical institutions or universities. And the same with Dr. Robert Honeyman. Off Twitter, he doesn't exist. And so it was really some really simple, quick due diligence on the part of a few folks on Twitter that found out like, hey, this guy who says his husband's in a coma because of COVID and who said his sister died of COVID is a total farce. And you might think, well, great, Twitter did its job. The problem is this guy's account has been around since August of 2020. And as I said, he claimed his sister died earlier this year of COVID, and that also got a ton of attention. And nobody found out at the time that this guy doesn't exist. He's not real. And neither is his little circle of COVID doctor buddies who have been, pushing out all this stuff about how bad COVID is. In fact, one of the things that this Dr. Robert Honeyman was tweeting about before his account has now been understood as just false, and has been suspended, by the way, is that he was in support of the extreme lockdowns in China. So you have to wonder, okay, who's behind these accounts? Is it Russia? Is it China? Who is it? And also one of the interesting things is, so his bio, Dr. Robert Honeyman's bio, says that he is says they, them, trans, doctor of sociology and feminist studies, keen interest in poetry, consultant for LGBTQ plus representation. And then a lot of the other, now we know, fake doctors that followed him also said they were LGBTQ plus doctors. And it's just this really interesting pattern. Dr. Gerald Fisher, every day is a school day, remaining safe in a multi-pandemic world, also an ally for all in the LGBTQ plus community, #wear a mask. And he's got behind his name, it's a flag of Ukraine, a gay rights flag, and a trans rights flag. And like all these fake doctors have the same thing: flag for Ukraine, gay rights flag, trans rights flag. And so it's just fascinating to me. And look, I get it that as human beings, when somebody says something bad happened to them like that, you want to believe them. Your instant reaction, you don't want it to be like that you're so jaded that it's like, but is his husband in a coma? But did his sister die? But this is just where we are as a society, where if you don't know someone online, then you can't believe anything they say. If it's not like a prominent person where it's a verified account, you know for sure, like, okay, this is who that is, then you really these days cannot believe anything. And you have to hold the feelings and wait for facts to come out. As I said earlier, This got thousands and thousands of retweets and likes and comments, actors, actresses, verified actual doctors who are real life, influencers, USA Today columnist, a senior writer for NBC News. And so you have this account that's been pushing out like COVID propaganda, and like backing up like the necessity as a doctor for these intense lockdowns in China, and gaining all this sympathy for a dead sister, a dying husband that doesn't even exist. And you just see how this system of bad actors can manipulate people. And it's really each and every one of us, our responsibility not to contribute to that, not to help grow the following of one of these accounts, not to help spread messages that might appeal to us because of, I think that we have a tendency, and I include myself in this as well, to believe something more readily if it fits in our worldview. So if you have someone who's like die hard, like COVID is still a public health crisis across the world, killing people, putting people in comas, then you're going to be more quick to look at this and be like, and share it, right? Share the message, spread the message, follow this guy. Whereas if you're someone who's like a little more skeptical and you're like looking at that like, I don't know, your sister died of COVID and now your husband's in a coma from COVID and you want people to follow you on Twitter, like, that's skeptical to me. So I think no matter how we feel about something we're reading, we really have to try to keep our feelings in check and really concern ourselves with facts, especially for those of us who have a platform, who have a following. We have a duty to try to keep false information like this in check and to keep it to as small of an audience as possible. And like I said, I am not perfect by any means. I have had instances where I've let my feelings and emotions take over instead of facts. And so that's something certainly in my position that I need to make sure that I don't do. But this was a really good catch from Katie Herzog and other astute Twitterers who noticed this when a lot of other prominent people, including journalists, did not. Okay, we've got to do a follow-up to the Elon Musk Twitter debacle. And look, I have been, Team Elon Musk, because I really feel like you had this huge social media platform that was unfairly silencing voices. And that was really happening more on the right than on the left. I thought the left was getting away with a lot of things, stoking inciting violence during 2020 that, Twitter turned around and during the Capitol riot, treated people much differently than they did when like cities were literally burning down in the summer of 2020. And so I thought Elon Musk is coming in. It's like same rules for everyone. And he's definitely hitting some road bumps. And we talked on the show yesterday about this Twitter account called Elon's Jet that has been tweeting out for a long time the live location of Elon Musk's private jet. And feel how you want about that. But Elon Musk himself said a month ago that his commitment to free speech on the platform was so great that it would even include the right of this account to share the private location of his jet, which was obtained through publicly available information. And Elon said, I'm going to allow him to do this, even though I think it's a personal risk to myself and my family. And now you fast forward a month, and apparently a car that Elon Musk's child was in was stopped by someone. So then he immediately comes out, blocks this account, suspends the account, and then last night suspends the accounts of several prominent journalists, New York Times, CNN, who were doing reporting on this issue, and in a roundabout way ended up sharing the link of where his private jet was. And so now, without warning or explanation, there's this sudden about-face from Twitter. And then you have prominent journalists whose accounts are being suspended. And that's when last night I was like, okay, this is not cool. This isn't any better than old Twitter. And, Elon Musk has been talking about these terrible decisions that were made in regards to accounts like Donald Trump and how he was going to be more transparent. And then he's doing all this, without any warning against journalism accounts. And that's problematic to me. That's very Orwellian to me when he says and has said repeatedly he's going to have this real consistent approach to free speech. And he called this jet account free speech just a month ago. I wanted to bring on journalist Brad Palumbo. He's been covering this whole ordeal for Based Politics. And I wanted to get his thoughts on, just generally speaking, this idea of is the Jet account doxing, but also about how Elon Musk has handled this situation and what it means for all of us, even if you don't have a Twitter account. Brad, thanks for joining unDivided. It's good to see you. Introduce yourself to folks who aren't familiar with you.
Sure, thanks for having me. I am a libertarian conservative journalist.
Oh, I love it. Libertarian conservative journalist. So before we even dive into the crazy that the last 24 hours on Twitter has been, why should people even care who don't kind of live in that Twitter world as much as you and I might?
Well, I think that probably the Twitter issue and the ongoings do get overhyped relative to their actual importance because, like you said, most Americans don't use Twitter. I think only 1 in 5 do. But I will say this, Twitter is a space where decision makers of pretty significant power, everybody from former presidents, the current president's staff, to major media figures, where they get their news and where they're heavily influenced. So I think we should all care to some extent about what's going on Twitter because it's influencing so many people who are then making the decisions that influence all of our lives.
So let's just start at the core of this issue with this Elon Jet account that's tracking and releasing the live location. Do you think that individual incident should constitute doxing?
Not really, not in the same sense as posting someone's home address, which is what we usually mean by doxing. I mean, tracking someone's jet is publicly available information, which you could say, okay, well, so are people's addresses if you know how to look. But your address is a static location that you're at that people could plan to go to and harm you. Whereas, like, what airport you just pinged at doesn't endanger you in the same way, in my opinion. Now, I think there's a serious, if debatable, case to be made that maybe these jet trackers are a safety risk and maybe they shouldn't be allowed on Twitter. But it's simply a fact that it is a reversal of Musk's former stances. He previously said that all legal speech would be allowed on Twitter, and posting this information is 100% legal. It is not against any law in the United States. He also literally said, I will not ban the Elon Jet account. That's how dedicated I am to free speech. And now something scary and very unfortunate happened involving someone harassing and accosting his child, and he's doing a 180 on that. I think we should debate the merits of it, but I do think we just have to point out the fact that he is flip-flopping on this. It's just a fact.
And do you think it was an emotionally charged decision?
Yeah, because of the thing that happened with his kid in the car and some crazy person accosting him, he's clearly letting his emotion override his decision making and flip-flopping on the principles that he previously laid out and said he was going to abide by, which is understandable as a human, but it's just not great for those of us who've been consistently calling for free speech principles on Twitter.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, nobody should blame a father for caring about the safety of their kids, but he's also the CEO of Twitter and needs to make sure that the decisions he's making aren't emotionally charged and that they're decisions that are going to kind of be able to withstand the test of time. So then, the Elon Jet account happened, and then obviously they started to suspend the accounts of journalists who, some of them, and some of them were political pundits that did share the link pretty blatantly, but others shared it kind of in the course of their own reporting. It wasn't like malicious. What do you make of the account suspensions?
Well, it's just not a great look to say you're going to restore free speech to a platform, then purge a bunch of journalists that don't like you and cover you negatively all at once late at night without much communication or explanation why. So I think the entire thing's been handled terribly. What I think he should have done is, if this is going to be your policy, delete the individual tweets where the link to the jet tracker was shared, and then maybe give these accounts a warning, establish a very clear standard, say this is no longer allowed, you can't do this, and then in the future they have fair warning. But this changed. This was allowed on Twitter for years, and then he snapped his fingers and changed the policy, and now all of a sudden he's suspending all these journalists. I think it's a total mess. I think it's inconsistent. And I just don't think it's in the spirit of what he promised to do when he took over this platform.
Well, and I don't know about you, but how have you looked at Elon Musk taking over Twitter to this point? Is it something that you've looked at generally positively?
Yeah, I would say lukewarm positively. I definitely think the old leadership of Twitter was deeply broken and was captured by one ideological silo. I think since Elon's taken over, he's been far more juvenile and trollish than I would like. But generally, the idea that someone says they believe in free speech and open exchange of ideas, getting in control of one of these social media companies is something that I was excited by. And I have largely agreed with a lot of the changes he's made at Twitter in terms of allowing people back on who were previously banned under the old regime. But to me, this seems to be undercutting a lot of that work.
I agree. And I wonder how he comes back from this because, after they suspended all these accounts, he put out this Twitter poll asking followers whether they thought that he should reinstate these accounts and on what timeline. So I guess how does he bounce back from this, if at all?
I think he can, especially because he only suspended these accounts for 7 days. So they'll just kind of be back before we know it. And then hopefully he'll learn from this and not repeat this kind of purge. But the thing about the polls is particularly funny to me. I remember a little while back, he did a Twitter poll, should Trump be reinstated on Twitter? Now, I actually think that Trump should be reinstated. That's been my view because the Ayatollah of Iran is allowed to be on. The literal Taliban is allowed to be on. So I think Trump, whatever you think of him, should be too. But he did it by Twitter poll. And I said at the time, like, not a great way to run a company. And so now he posts a Twitter poll, should I unban these journalists? And of course, the outcome didn't come the way he wanted, so he's not doing it. So I don't get what he's going for because he tweets this Latin saying like the people's will shall reign or whatever. But apparently there's a little bit of selectivity about when that applies.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you that I've been a little disappointed with, and I think how you kind of phrased it is the childish behavior that this childish nature in which he's responded to some of these things. Let's end with this. Some of these legacy blue check marks have been saying, during this all up and down with Twitter, oh, if Twitter ends or whatever, find me here, and posting their different social media accounts. And one of them is this new platform, Mastodon, which I guess is supposed to be the answer to Elon Musk's Twitter. Do you think there's any legs to Mastodon?
I'm not on it, so I can't really say one way or other. I've heard bad things about its user experience and its interface, which is kind of a death knell for a tech startup. It's hard enough to get people to switch to something, but then if they switch to it and it's like crappy and hard to use, it's really not going to go well. But I do think there's plenty of alternatives to Twitter. I mean, there's everything from Facebook to TikTok to Instagram to email newsletters like Substack to YouTube. I mean, there really are so many ways to get a message out there. So whatever happens with Twitter, it's not the end of the world.
Brad, where can people find your work?
Well, check out the Based Politics podcast, and you can listen to me and my co-host Hannah Cox every Wednesday.
Yeah, I've definitely dabbled with it a little bit, and I think people who like this show will really like that one. So definitely check it out. Brad, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Oh boy. Okay, I have long said that congressional hearings are the worst. I rarely get anything out of a congressional hearing. It's grandstanding. You have sometimes politicians who have no clue what they're talking about. It's clear it's like their staff gave them some papers like, here's information and questions, and they're just reading it. But they're usually just grandstanding. They're not even asking the witnesses questions. They're just making a statement just to get on the news. I don't know. So I hate congressional hearings. But man, damn, was there a good moment in a congressional hearing this week that I loved. Maybe it'll get me excited about congressional hearings again. So obviously, Democrats are still in control in the House until the new year. And so they really get to drive these hearings in the U.S. House of Representatives. And so there was a hearing in the House Committee on Oversight and Reform that was looking at the links between white supremacy and anti-LGBTQ extremism. And so, they have this panel of quote unquote experts on this issue that they bring in. One of them was a person named Alejandra Caraballo, who is a clinical instructor at Harvard Law School's Cyber Law Clinic and is also a transgender woman. So, and again, this is supposed to be an expert on this issue of, online extremism with the right wing and how it impacts LGBTQ people in real life. Well, Representative Nancy Mace, who's a Republican from South Carolina, didn't think that Alejandra Caraballo ought to be speaking about such a subject. Why? Well, because Representative Mace brought some receipts out, and it turns out that Alejandra Caraballo hasn't exactly been the most peaceful person on social media.
Is rhetoric on social media a problem and a threat to our democracy, Mr. Ward?
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Ms. Caraballo?
Yes.
Ms. Nomani?
Yes.
Ms. Tyler?
Yes.
Yes.
Another question I have, do you believe that rhetoric targeting officials with violence for carrying out their constitutional duties is a threat to democracy, Mr. Ward? Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Only a few weeks after the attempted attack on a Supreme Court justice on June 25th, one of the witnesses, Alejandra Caraballo, tweeted out the following in response to a decision on abortion overturning Roe v. Wade, and I'll quote directly from the tweet: "The 6 justices who overturned Roe should never know peace again. It is our civic duty to accost them every time they're in public. They are pariahs. Since women don't have their rights, these justices should never have a peaceful moment in public again." I know something about being accosted. The night of January 5th, I was physically accosted on the streets of DC in Navy Yard by a constituent of mine. I fervently blamed rhetoric on social media, rhetoric at public events, for being physically accosted. I carry a gun everywhere I go when I am in my district and I'm at home, because I know personally that rhetoric has consequences. I've had my car keyed. I've had my house spray painted. I had someone trespass in my house as recently as August. I've been doxxed on social media about where I live. And I've had to add to security everywhere I go. Often, because I can't afford it, I have to carry my own firearm wherever I go. And Alejandra Caraballo also recently tweeted on November 19th, not even a month ago, that the Supreme Court, vested with the judicial power of the United States by our Constitution, stated they are not a legitimate court issuing decisions. And also the Supreme Court is an organ of the far right. So my last question today of Ms. Caraballo: do you stand by these comments, this kind of rhetoric on social media? And do you believe it's a threat to democracy?
Thank you, Representative, for the opportunity to clarify and provide context to my tweets.
I have a question, is it yes or no? Do you believe your rhetoric is a threat to democracy when you're calling to accost a branch of government, the Supreme Court?
I don't believe that's a correct characterization
What
of
you
my
tweeted,
statements.
though. Did you not tweet that? That you thought that the Supreme Court justices should be accosted?
What I'm
you
saying
tweet
is
that,
that
yes or
that is
no?
not an
Did you tweet
accurate characterization of my statements.
And I mean, I'm sorry. That's, first of all, it's embarrassing for Democrats who didn't vet this person for a congressional hearing. But it also proves a point that I've been talking about for a long time. And that is that you have these, really one-sided, this really one-sided focus when it comes to who's guilty of political violence. The right blames the left blames the right. When those of us with common sense know that extreme politics exists on both sides, political extremism, violence, the capacity for violence, it exists on both sides, and we see it, and threats online. And so any institution, any panel, any hearing that tries to look at political violence as a one-sided issue is just dishonest to me. Not only is it dishonest, it's clear to me that they're not actually looking to solve the problem. They're not actually looking to understand the problem, because it's not a one-sided problem. We have a real issue with political extremism in this country, but it is not a left or right issue. And so I tend to just not take anyone seriously who tries to paint it in that way. And I thought that's what Rep. Nancy Mace did a really good job of exposing. When we talked earlier on this week about the fact that often the mainstream media ignores far left extremism and far left violence, or covers up for it, or diminishes it. And so here you have a case where you have a Democrat-led hearing about extremism and violence that's kind of perpetrated, or the flames are fanned by the right wing. And here they have this quote unquote expert sitting on the panel that's going to talk about this, who has fanned the flames of violence on social media. I mean, it's a joke. It turns the whole hearing into a joke. And so kudos to Rep. Nancy Mace for bringing the receipts and for painting a blistering picture of how hypocritical some of these hearings can be. Alrighty, it's Friday. That means it's time to go all the way from Washington down to the Sunshine State, see what's happening in Florida. And I have something to tell my sister when we get started.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Joining us is our Florida-based correspondent, my sister Miranda. You asked before we started recording if you looked okay, and I said yes, but I lied because that's the ugliest shirt I've ever seen.
Enough, I like it.
It's hideous.
Oh.
It's like a 70s bowling shirt.
I think it kind of looks like when you're looking at those like maps that show like the topography, where it's like the height and depth of a mountain or a lake. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I mean, you're so pretty you can pull it off, but on me, I can't even begin. Anyway, we're boring people who only listen to the podcast.
Okay.
One of my biggest annoyances in Washington State is like they want to basically just toll every road. Like if you're in a car, they're tolling you, and tolls here are just excessive in my opinion. Well, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is trying to help out Floridians on the cost of tolls. Tell us about it.
He is. He just signed a bill into legislation that'll go into effect the beginning of this coming year. So January 1st of 2023. Anybody who is a consistent commuter on Florida roads, which is pretty much all of us, are going to get up to a 50% relief on our tolls coming into the next year, which is pretty significant because we're the same. We're tolled to death down here. We don't have state tax, so I think that plays a big role into like why there are so many toll roads, but it gets expensive. I myself pay like anywhere between $400 and $500 a month on tolls, and that's just being probably generous to them and not me. But yeah, it'll be nice to see a little bit of a break on that. And it's for anybody that's using the Sun Pass or the Easy Pass. I'm not sure what you guys call your passes up there. So it's going to be directly like to help out anybody that's like working in Florida, commutes all the time, and not really for helping out anybody that's paying at the tolls or tourists that are renting vehicles and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so you've got to have like a Sun Pass. So obviously if you're from out of state, you're not going to have one of those in your vehicle. And so you're just going to get a full toll. And then I'm assuming they have something to differentiate like a rental vehicle in Florida that's got one of those. So I like this, and it's just temporary, but it's a nice way to help people out.
Yeah, it really is. It's a huge expense. I mean, some people are paying more on their tolls than they are on a car payment or an insurance payment. And that's painful to deal with every month when you're just trying to like work and collect your money.
Yeah, it really adds up. Another follow-up to a DeSantis story we had talked about, he was trying to get creative to help with the state's teacher shortage, which states across the country are dealing with a teacher shortage. And so this is like several months ago, I think we discussed on Florida Report. He was basically trying to streamline the process for veterans to be able to teach, making it a little bit easier, fewer hoops for them to jump through. And now we're learning from the Military Times that not a lot of veterans have taken him up on that.
Yeah, well, a lot actually kind of did. I think they had over 500 applicants.
Okay.
But out of those 500 applicants, they've only placed 7 of those people into teaching jobs throughout the state, which is a very low number considering I think they were expecting this to kind of be something to help fill the gaps in. But I think it also maybe proves on a positive note that they're not just giving these jobs to anybody. you know, like they actually have some sort of vetting process that kind of narrowed it pretty far down. And it's not just military vets, it's also any first responders or military families, spouses, things like that are also eligible for this program too. So I think they're going to keep doing it. They're going to leave it open. I don't think it's going to solve the problem. I think the only way you can solve the teaching issues is by paying them more money. But that's a whole different conversation.
So is that the reason for the discrepancy between like 500 signed up for it and only 7, you said, right, got placed?
Yeah, only 7 got placed.
Is the discrepancy there just that, 493 of them didn't meet other qualifications or didn't follow through on the process?
I think it was a combination of things. When you read through the article, it kind of talks about how some people didn't meet all the qualifications. Some people couldn't relocate to the areas that actually needed the assistance. I think there was a lot of factors that went into that, but it definitely helped out 7 military families. And I kind of looked at this from both angles, like, okay, you're going to help solve this teacher shortage, which is great, but also military families, first responder families, spouses, they also are given an opportunity here to take advantage of that. And even if it's only 7, it's still 7 families that are getting additional income and 7 teaching positions that now students are going to have a teacher for. So it's a small win, but I hope that maybe they can figure out why so many people didn't, meet those qualifications and find a way around that, because it would have been nice to fill 500 teaching positions and not just 7.
Yeah, but at the same time, like you said, you want to make sure people are qualified if they can't move there, like that's a thing. But you're right. I mean, it's 7 more than otherwise had they not gotten creative in that way. And so I like the creativity. I don't think you often find the government creativity. And so I do appreciate it. Let's end with kind of a fun one. So there is a literal Grinch on the streets of Florida.
Yep. Down, if you happen to be speeding through a school zone in Marathon Key, down in the Florida Keys, you could get pulled over by the Grinch. And instead of getting a speeding ticket, he's going to give you a stinky onion to sit in your car to teach you a lesson. It is actually a sheriff's deputy that is playing the role of the Grinch, and just kind of lightheartedly reminding people that it is really extremely dangerous to speed, let alone speed through a school zone when you have small children that are excited to leave school for the holidays or whatever have you. So just kind of a fun way to get people to pay attention when they're driving around during the season.
The photos of this are really funny, and I can't even imagine, because it's like the worst moment when you see that you're getting pulled over and you're like, shit. And then when you see like this fully dressed Grinch getting out of the patrol car, I just, the emotion must be hilarious. And I loved this quote from this deputy who said, "It catches them off guard, but when I give them a clear choice of a citation or the onion, they will take the onion. And I've had them eat the onion right in front of me." So I love it. It's memorable. I think it creates good bonds between the public and law enforcement, and it helps keep kids safe. So an all-around win.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It definitely is all around a good holiday story.
All right, Miranda. Well, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
All right, we're getting back to basics on understanding America today, because we've been having this whole conversation about free speech, like, oh, Elon Musk, free speech, Twitter, da-da-da. But remember, Elon Musk has no obligation to give anyone unlimited free speech. Twitter's a private company. They can ban whoever they want. They can suspend the accounts of anyone they want for any reason at all. And I think, that's kind of what we always forget when it comes to the issue of free speech, is our guaranteed First Amendment rights have nothing to do with private companies, private individuals, your ability to post whatever you want on social media. It has to do with the government's ability or inability to be able to limit your free speech. So just as a reminder, the First Amendment, patriotic music, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Congress shall make no law. That being said, Elon Musk has basically said that the tenets of that, the spirit of the First Amendment, is what he's trying to adopt for Twitter. It's what he is really trying to follow. And so, no, he's not bound by it. Twitter's not bound by it. But if he is going to really make it a platform where there's a commitment to free speech, he needs to spend some time, I think, reflecting on why he bought Twitter in the first place and reflecting on what free speech means to him and what free speech is going to mean on Twitter. All right, that's it for this Friday edition of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to give common sense a comeback. A friendly reminder, so we're getting into the holidays, obviously with Christmas and stuff. We're going to have regular shows throughout the next 2 weeks because none of our shows land on an actual holiday. But as you're traveling around, I'm telling you, my 2-day bender with illness this week was awful. It really was truly awful. And I'm not like much of a wuss, but it might have been the sickest I've ever been in my adult life. So just, and it wasn't COVID. I tested negative for COVID, but just be cautious. There's some stuff floating around, if you're visiting elderly loved ones or whatever, because that was no joke. And I just want all of you to be as safe and healthy as possible. All right, I'll see you right back here on Monday.